Thanks for the intro. Thank you very much. Tu as la Telecommande? Okay, we're gonna get some lessons tonight. Ich kann ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen, aber ich habe mein Vokabular verloren. So ich glaube, dass ob Sie mit mir Deutsch sprechen wollen, Sie müssen warten, dass ich like 3 oder 5 Bier trinke und dann vielleicht kann ich wieder Deutsch sprechen. But I'm going to switch to English. So thanks for having me, thanks for the invitation, and thanks for introducing me. I'm an entrepreneur. I do many things, and today I'm going to tell you about what I think are the rules to survive all the changes that are happening around us. You know that we are going through a lot of changes in these times. And to open this talk, I choose this picture of someone who obviously survived innovation very well. It's a picture I shot in Rome, and this guy dressed as a Roman is actually using his phone. So this guy went through the centuries and survived all the different waves of innovation. So indeed, I'm the founder of the LIFT conference, which is like a giant brainstorm about all the trends and all the new technologies and their impact on society. And I'm actually doing a lot of different things. I'm a consultant, I'm a lecturer at the University of Lausanne, I'm a venture partner in a company who's investing in financial startups. A lot of things, but mainly what I do is that I'm this little guy here. I'm the canary in the coal mine. I'm the one who's trying to tell people there are big changes coming and you should mind them. You should try to understand them before they kill your business model, like so many technologies have killed so many people's business models. I try to tell people, for example, about this kind of things that is currently happening in South Africa. It's the project called Village Telco. It's actually an initiative that wants to, it's like a telecom operator in a kit. It's a very disrupting idea. So it's basically a little device that costs $30 to $40, and you put it in your house, and if your neighbor has one, both devices connect, and you form some kind of peer-to-peer phone network. So actually, obviously, this completely bypasses the operators, and as soon as one of the nodes on the network is connected to the internet or to the phone network, then everybody can call, or everybody at least can use the internet. So that's the kind of thing that if you're a telecom operator, I think you should be aware of, that people are going to start using peer-to-peer technologies to bypass and pay less money. So that's what I do, and I'm pretty busy right now because, as you know, we are going through quite an intense phase of innovation. So this slide is in French, but you see it's like a timeline of the number of inventions. So we had this huge peak at the end of the 19th century when a lot of things were invented, like airplanes and cars and vaccines, and so many things were invented. Electricity, obviously, at that period. But we are doing pretty good, 1980, and I think it's still going up. And it's true that we are going through very, very challenging times. And when I try to summarize this shift we're having, this is what I use. I tell people this is where we were, it's on the left, and this is where we're going. And you see that there are many, many changes in so many areas of our society. We go from privacy to what I call publicity, which is this kind of sense of projecting yourself. We go from website to social network. We go from like having an edge because you know something to foresight, having an edge because you know something is going to happen in the future. So many of these things. And I wanted to start by just focusing on a few of these changes that I think are very important, just to tell you how much society is changing right now. The first one is social network. Every time I see a speaker talk about social network, I usually switch off. And you've heard everything, blah, 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 the numbers, 1 billion users, you know everything. But what's very interesting about social network and where they become very disruptive is when you start mixing this idea of Facebook with businesses. And I don't know if you've seen that I find quite fascinating. It's an initiative by KLM. And actually, when you check in, you put your social network profile. And then the people who are going to check after you can check your profile and they can choose to sit next to you. So obviously it's one of the systems where a lot of men are going to use that a lot and women probably a bit less. Because if you're a good-looking woman, you will be surrounded by all these guys. But it's an interesting idea when you start mixing social media with other things. This is another example from Sheraton. So they wanted to create stories around their hotels, and they wanted to basically gather some of the knowledge that their clients build around their experience in a hotel. And people go to a hotel, and then they go into an amazing restaurant, or they do a day trip somewhere. And so they tried to build a community where you could tell these stories and share them with other clients, which in the end makes the experience at the hotels much better. Obviously, social media are very interesting because they allow us to tap into people's mind. And I'll talk about data mining a bit later, but this, I don't know if you've seen these things. It was both Facebook and also Twitter had some kind of election index where you could follow the sentiment that was going around every candidate, and in real time you could see who was going up and down. And these things are actually pretty accurate. And you can see the big blue peak is, for example, when there was a convention or something. And so they allow us to kind of have a picture of what people are thinking at a certain time. This is an example of a radio using Twitter to analyze, we've talked about media a bit, but to analyze how their audience is reacting to their programs. So you have the different times, and then you see the number of tweets and the number of retweets, and you can see the line over the past 24 hours, and it tells them in real time what people liked or what made them react. And this is quite an interesting thing with social media that is now possible. This one, Twitter can be used to predict the future of stocks, and a lot of people in the finance industry are disputing that, and they are right to. But still, if you look at the result, the fund has actually worked better than the market. And the way they do it is that they look at what people are saying around different stocks, and they will anticipate what's going to happen on the market, whether the stock is going to be up or down. So that's one thing. I think the switch to social media is bringing a lot of disruption right now. Another thing, another big change we're going through is that we're going from intuition to reality mining. Obviously, it's not black and white, but it's a big trend. And reality mining, you might have heard of the name like data mining or big data. What is it? This is reality mining. I don't know if you've seen this. It's quite old. It's from 2008. This is Madrid, the night of the Euro final. This is the number of phone calls that people are making. The game just started, goal 1, goal 2. Everybody's worried, and then celebration. The game just ended. And maybe I should play that again. This is so capture from cell phone data, real time, what people are doing if people are making calls. And you see everybody's gathering in the center, the game starts, goal number 1, goal number 2, the Spanish won 2-0, and then the big explosion. It's quite fascinating what you can do with data. This is just the data of mobile phone usage, anonymized, so there is no privacy breach, and you put it on a map, and then suddenly you can understand where people are in the city and what they do. And this, as a business, opens up a lot of possibilities. That's a major, major change. This is another example from Fabien Girardin, who's a researcher at the Near Future Laboratory. And what he did is that he took pictures from Flickr, which is like the YouTube of images, and the pictures are geolocalized, so you know where they've been taken. So he looked at all the pictures that were taken in Barcelona by people who do not live in Barcelona, which means the tourists. And then he drew a map of where the tourists are actually going into the city. Very useful for city planners. Just last week, you know, Obama always seems to have one technological edge over whoever he's fighting. And 4 years ago, it was social media. This year, it was data mining. So what did they do? They, for example, had fundraising campaigns where they would send test emails to different people in different states. And one email was from Michelle Obama, another email was from Joe Biden, the third email was from Barack Obama himself, and the emails had different subject lines. And then they were sending, 500 emails, and then they would see which one had the better response rate in terms of donations. And they would constantly refine the title and refine who's sending, and every day it would be changing. Someday Biden would raise more money, someday Michelle Obama would be raising more money, but every day they would adapt based on the data and in real time. And actually what they do is that every day they were running 66,000 times the election in their simulators, and depending on what they found, they would allocate their resources differently. This is extremely impressive and completely based on data, and that's why we used to do that based on intuition, but now, in some case, we can do it with data. And actually, we can get data in a lot of places. This is a technology that is actually on the market. It's a little sensor that can go into your food, and you have a little patch that goes on your arm, and the sensor is going to be ingested, and it's going to start reporting data to the patch, which then reports it back to your phone. So doctors can actually collect data about what's happening inside your belly. That's quite impressive. So you can get data in many, many places. Another very big change is the fact that we're going from a world of intellectual property to replicability. And you all know that it happened to the music industry or to the movie industry. Of course, Napster was the poster boy for that. But now something interesting is happening. And can you tell me what's special about that violin? There is sound, but... So it's a working violin, right? What's special about it is that it's been 3D printed. 3D printing is a technology that is basically able to recreate products. I won't explain you how it works, but it's now able to do these kind of things. Of course, not the strings, but just the body of the violin was done like that. And now you enter a world where basically objects can be customized and readapted before they are turned into objects. And this is a company called Digital Forming. And so they have like lamps, and you go on the site and you customize your lamp, you change the direction, you change the color, and you press a button, and then they print it and they send it to you. So basically what's happening is that the replicability that happened in the digital world is now coming to objects. And think about the implications of that. And I'm showing that to you just to show you how big the changes that we are all going to face in the coming years, how big these changes are. And think about this idea mixed with weapons. It means that soon some people are actually working on weapons that you can print back home yourself. Think about that. Any object becomes replicable by anybody who has a 3D printer. This is a website called Thingiverse where you can actually upload a model of something you want to print, and you can share it with anyone, just like you would share an MP3 file. So how does it work? You made this like iPhone dock, and you just like, it's made of these different parts, and you put the downloads here, and people just click, get the file, put it in their printer, and then they get the object themselves. If you are in a business that is living on very simple objects, I think you should be aware of that. One last thing I wanted to show you, one of these very big change that is happening is how we're going from an asynchronous world to a real-time world. And I don't know if you know this technology. It's called SynTap. It's happening in the US, and it's like cameras on top of the entry of bars, and this camera monitor the face of people entering, and they can tell you in real time what bar has a lot of tenants right now. And actually, their technology is very evolved, so it can differentiate women and men. So it can tell you, in this bar tonight, there are many women in real time. That's very interesting technology. Obviously, this is the nightmare of retailers right now, because it's Amazon that released an app that you can scan anything, and then you can check the price in real time on Amazon or other retailers working with Amazon. And think about the disruption this is going to bring to the way people shop if you are in retail. This one is one of my personal favorite. Price Spanner, again, very good usage of real-time technology. So you know these e-commerce websites, they usually have interns that enter the items in the database. And sometimes the intern, instead of entering 999, will enter 99.9. So this system is actually monitoring all the e-commerce websites in real time. And as soon as there is a price mistake, it sends an email to everybody who registered and say, quickly order stuff before they find out. And then they have to deliver it to you because it was the price that was published. So this is quite fascinating. To show you how real time is becoming part of society, this is an Israeli defense system that basically tracks the missiles and is able to send SMS to all the people that are on the trajectory of the missile, or at least where they think the missile is going to fall. So real-time warning system. San Francisco has real-time parking information, so you can know where there are slots. This I find completely useless. I don't really know why they do that, but it's quite interesting to see because it's a technology that is on the ground and knows if there is a car or not. So you can see that in general, in a specific area, you are more likely to find a parking spot. I don't really like it because I think that by the time you check your phone for an open spot, it's been taken, at least in many cities. This is another one that I like. It's basically a sheep collar that the sheep wear, and if the sheep see a wolf, he gets a bit nervous, so his heart gets to beat faster, and then that sends an SMS to the shepherd telling him like, this sheep has a big problem, go to see him. So this is pretty cool. Reporting Wired, Swiss technology. Last example of real time is this Go Try It On, how it's like changing the fashion industry right now. Go Try It On is basically an app that you use when you are, testing some clothes you want to buy, and you just take a picture of yourself, and it's posted immediately on your social networks, and then within a few minutes, and it really works like that, within a few minutes you get feedback from your friends who tell you, get it or no, like pink is really not for you. So all that to show you that there are a lot of changes, and you hear about that all the time, but I just try to pinpoint a few examples to show you how big some of these changes are, and seriously, there's been some pretty big changes in the past 15 years, but trust me, there's going to be even more in the coming 20 years. So why do some people do this? Apple. And why do some people do that? Nokia. Well, I've been observing a lot through my job and as a conference organizer, as a consultant, and I try to summarize for you guys a bit what I observed and what I think are good rules that you could use to be more like Apple and less like Nokia. The first thing I want to say is that I think it's very important that you protect the future from the past. And it might be a bit abstract, but let me explain. Nokia, actually, the head of design of Nokia presented to the board a touch screen, color screen, with one button at the bottom of the phone. So he presented basically a smartphone around the year 2000 to the board of Nokia. Oh, and by the way, he had a side project, which was a little tablet, year 2000. We're talking 7 years before the iPhone and 10 years before the iPad. And what happened is that actually at that time, Motorola was making a lot of money from the Razr phone. So Nokia was getting a lot of pressure from the investors that why don't you make as much money as Motorola? You should be doing that. So the CEO at the time merged both the smartphone and the dumb phone, the simple phone, divisions together. And of course, because the simple phone was making so much money, and so much more money than the smartphone because the market was not existing, obviously these guys were calling the shots. So what happened was when the new product came, they just shut it down. Say like, why would we invest in that thing that's going to potentially kill our business? And basically, that's a very, very striking case of a company that is protecting the past from the future instead of protecting the future product from the past. And I think you shouldn't do that. Another example is Kodak. Kodak invented digital photography, and now they went bankrupt. And what happened is that the people who invented the photography were actually shut down inside the company. Why? Because culturally, these guys were making so much money from film that they didn't want this new innovation to disrupt because everything was comfortable and money was flowing, and why would you bother doing something else? And there was a lot of arrogance and there was a lot of ignorance that basically ended up with them filing for Chapter 11. So Tim O'Reilly, the famous book editor in the US, said, you should protect the future from the past, not the past from the future. And I think that this is really a rule that everybody should remember. And it has some very, very deep ramifications. And when you think about it, when you think of the choices you guys have to make as managers, you very often are faced with that. So think about it. Bottom line is that you have to find balance. Obviously, the products that are making money today, you shouldn't be shut down, and you should find a balance between now and the future. But you should really protect what's coming next and adapt the governance according to that. Second thing I observe is that you cannot buy innovation. And that seems to be, there are no arguments other than the figures, but there was a study made about the 1,000 public listed company, and that found absolutely no correlation between how much a company spends on R&D and its overall performance. And to illustrate it, I put this picture of probably the most puzzling product I've seen in years, which is the ketchup for dogs. I wonder what kind of R&D comes up to that. But you can buy that in France. The right is the ketchup, the left is mustard or something. But these are the expenditures, the R&D expenditures of the big tech companies. And you see Microsoft, that's 2009 figures. I couldn't find more recent figures, but the trend is still the same. 9 billion for Microsoft and 1 billion for Apple. And you all know how innovative Apple has been. And look at on the left graph, you see that Nokia since 2000 was spending close to 2 billion on innovation and on research, and Apple was barely spending maybe 500 million. And still, at that time, from 2002 to 2004 to 2007, Apple was doing the iPhone. So it's amazing how these figures are actually not correlated with innovation. And I tried to find an explanation for that, and I think that's the closest I came. It's somebody who was saying that innovation is not a skill, it's not a process, it's not a product, it's a culture. And a culture is not something you can buy. And I think that's a very rational explanation. So my advice would be to remember that innovation cannot be bought, which is, by the way, not completely true. There are some examples of startups being bought by big companies. The best example is Android, who was bought for 50 million by Google and is now like a huge part of Google. But you get the idea. It's not because you spend money that you are innovative. And innovation is a lot about the intangibles, about the people, about the culture. Democracy isn't always better. I had one day, I was very lucky, I went to a hotel in Italy and I bumped into this guy, and he's Don Norman, and he's running the Norman Nielsen Group, which is a very big usability firm. And he told me a story because he worked 10 years at Apple and 10 years at Microsoft. And he told me, everybody believes that working at Apple is cool and working at Microsoft sucks, because everybody thinks that Apple's products are cool and Microsoft products are bad. And he says it's the complete opposite. Microsoft products are bad because it's a democracy. And so they try to be nice to everyone. So they do these giant meetings, and there are like 500 people who say, wow, we could do this, we could do that. And that's why in Excel we end up using 2% of what the product can actually do. Apple is completely the opposite. It's a dictatorship. And he was telling me that the employees at Apple were actually really scared of one thing, is that they would be stuck in the elevator with Steve Jobs. Because he would ask you, so what are you working on? It's like, I'm doing this like little product on this. It's, oh, come show it to me. And then you knew it was finished. Because he would take over. And so the dictatorship really produced much better products. And you know the story, there are millions of quotes from Steve Jobs, but he was saying like you have to remove what's unnecessary to really focus on what's necessary. And this vision, I think, is very strong. But there are a few counterexamples. Actually, the next speaker is going to tell you about open innovation, how you embed your customers into the process of building a product, which, by the way, is a form of democracy when you ask your customers what they want. It's true, and I think that there are also some limits, because typically when you talk about very disruptive technologies, the customer cannot know that in 5 years such a technology will exist. The customer cannot know that a technology that is currently very expensive is going to be affordable in a few years. So you also have to take that into account. And this is somebody from HP who was saying that consumers don't really know what's possible. And I think that's true. So in the end, democracy versus one person's vision. It's always hard to make the decision, but trying to listen to everybody is not necessarily a good thing when you want to do a good product. And I think that you have to listen to people, but you have to constantly keep in mind that you have to filter what comes out, and you have to also think ahead, which users are not necessarily able to do. Watch out for emerging countries' innovation. I mentioned that because it's very common knowledge. For most people, we're like, emerging countries, all they do is that they copy us. It's a bit more complicated than that. This is an example of Kenyan innovation. So M-Pesa, it's a very famous system where you can actually exchange money by SMS. And now there is 25% of the GDP of the country that is going through that system. And now we start to have European companies going to Kenya to see what they do and how they could copy that or bring it to their own market. This is Indian company that designed a very cheap tractor, and actually they found that the product was very appealing to some US people, who were not professional farmers, but actually wanted to have some kind of like leisure tractor. That exists in the US apparently. And so they brought the product over, and suddenly they created that market that did not exist. And that's really what we call reverse innovation. And you see so many things are happening in developing countries or emerging countries or re-emerging countries like China that are very interesting. This is a Chinese company who is going to build the world's tallest building in like 90 days. I'm not going there. This is like, they have new process that they now want to bring to developed countries. And big companies are actually noticing. GE, General Electric is actually doing products now in India and in China. $1,000 handheld electrocardiogram, an ultrasound machine for $15,000, which before was like 5 or 10 times the price. And they develop the products in these countries and they bring them back to the US. And in that article from the Harvard Business Review, they were listing, all the places where innovation happens in emerging markets: low-cost healthcare service, carbon sequestration, solar and wind power, biofuels, distributed power generation, batteries, water desalination, microfinance. All these fields, there is a lot of innovation happening in emerging countries. And what's very interesting, I found, is that now we start to see these companies coming to our doorstep. This is an Indian clinic who's opening a hospital in the Cayman Islands because they can do heart surgery for 1/10 of the price of a procedure in the US. This is, if you remember, when IBM sold its PC operations to Lenovo, there were like big cries of, it's going to lose some jobs in the US. And now what's happening? Lenovo is coming back to the US and plans to open a plant, a factory in the US. It's very, very interesting. So just remember that emerging nations are not just copying what we do, but there is a lot of things that are happening there. There are a lot of things happening there. And you should change your vision of these countries and try to see what they do and maybe copy them. Another thing that I found very striking is that it's so hard to understand the future, but one thing that seems to happen is that you can sometimes look back, and looking back tells you where things are going to go. Let me give you an example. What's happening with the music industry, with the download industry? Artists have to go back and perform live in front of their fans. Isn't it what they used to do 60 years ago, before the recording industry? If you want to know the future of music, you have to take into account digital and all the new technologies that are happening, but also look at what happened when the market was based on people performing in front of the public. And then you will maybe see what the future is going to be like. Because it's always these patterns, and things come back, and it's like a pendulum that switches between different things. 3D printing, I mentioned it earlier, it's just that people can now create objects themselves. Isn't it how we used to be maybe 200-300 years ago, that everybody could do their own objects, and there were no stores where you can get everything? The crowdfunding platform, like the Kickstarter, where you go, you have a project, and you raise money from people, it's exactly the same model that was used during the Middle Age by artists. And they would just raise money from rich people, and they would do things. That's how the Suez Canal was actually funded at the Paris Expo. One guy went and raised all the money from different people. And there's constantly that. If you try to find parallels with the past. I know Twitter is very complicated for many people to understand. But what is Twitter? Twitter is like SMS with two different things. SMS is one-to-one, and Twitter is one-to-many. SMS is I, as the sender, choose the recipient. Twitter is I, as the recipient, choose the sender. But Twitter is just that. It's nothing more than that. And if you are afraid of Twitter, try to use this rule, and then you shouldn't be afraid anymore, because you can refer to something that you've known in the past. And so my advice is to try to find similarities and also try to see how it turned out in the previous iterations to basically figure out what's going to happen. Fight positively, that's a very important point. When the DVD was invented, it kind of disrupted a very conservative industry. So the first reaction was, DVD is going to kill us, it's going to kill cinema, we're going to be out of business, like Christ. And obviously that's for that reason, there were all these restrictions and all the zones and everything, and that you would pay to have the right to watch a movie, but you couldn't watch it because it was not the right zone and all that stuff. And of course, what had to happen happened. This, my favorite slide ever. You know, the industry thought people are just going to go down that road and we'll put a little barrier and we'll ask them to pay money, we open the barrier and then they get in. But it's not what people do. So you have this like very well-planned path and people just walk around it. What was working around it? It was BitTorrent. It was downloading the movies in peer-to-peer way and in a way that could not be shut down, like Napster was shut down. And why would people do that? This is why. If you're a pirate, you get this. You put your movie, you watch your movie. If you're a paying customer, this is what you get. FBI warning, coming soon. The green screen telling you this movie can be watched by people 13 and older. First unskippable trailer, second widescreen, second unskippable trailer, third widescreen, third unskippable trailer, then DVD menu, then FBI warning, then THX, then the logo of and finally your movie, and you're almost dead, and it's been 10 minutes, right? So this is like a typical example of an industry that wants to fight innovation in a negative way by like bugging their customers and giving like crappy products instead of following the customers where they wanted to go. And I did that. It was very funny because, you know, they started to sue everybody, and we're going to sue you because you download. And so if you put Hollywood Studios sue in Google, it's like 337,000 results. So the lawyers have been pretty busy with them, I think, there. But what did people want? They just wanted to be able to download the movies and watch them from their home. They just wanted to have VOD like Apple TV and iTunes gives you. And people just couldn't get that from the industry that was trying to fight this innovation, which was the internet, by just denying it. And that doesn't work. When the industry started to innovate, they started to get good results again. 3D cinema. People were saying, we're going to go back to see the movies if they're 3D, because it's an improvement over what we can do at home. Another very good example of what I'm saying is the tablet world. If you look at the tablet world, everybody was trying to fight with Apple by doing the same thing. And so you had all these like clone tablets, and none of them was taking off. And then the only one who started to really challenge Apple was the Kindle Fire, which was released like 1 year ago. And suddenly there was something new. There was a new model. You would pay the device like a game console. You would pay it cheaper because Amazon would be making money from the content. And so as soon as there was a real innovation and like a positive response, then the competition was on again. So my advice is that you should always fight positively. And running after people is not good. Sending lawyers to sue your clients is not good. And what you have to do in the face of innovation is bring to the market something that is new and better. See through the hype. Very important point. You remember, if you're an old person like me, the buzz that was happening around technologies. I just did like the digital technology buzz, right? In the 90s, if you don't have a homepage, you're a loser. That was the message. In 2000, if you don't have a portal, you're like completely out of the game. In 2002, dude, you don't have a blog, like don't even talk to me, you know? 2005, Facebook. 2007, my favorite, Second Life, which is now like almost completely gone. And Twitter, 2008, et cetera, et cetera. And when you look at it, every time the media is hyping a technology and telling you, wow, if you don't do this, you just don't get it. And if you look a bit back over the past 15, 20 years, you see that actually I tried to do this little like informal table, and I put in red what I think didn't work or kind of disappeared, and that nobody cares about having a homepage anymore. It's like social media world. You know, the WAP, do you remember the WAP? That was so amazing, like surfing, paying like $20 a second for like black and white stuff. And then I put in blue what is still here, but under another form, obviously peer-to-peer. Napster is gone, but peer-to-peer is still here. And then in green, I put things that are still important and up and running. And you can come up with this kind of informal rule, like whatever you're going to read in the media, 1/3 is going to disappear, 1/3 is going to be successful, and 1/3 is going to still be here. The idea will be here, but under another form. So my advice is that whatever, when you read the media, and it's not just the newspapers, it's the blogs and it's everything, you have to keep in mind that there is a lot of noise and you need to be pragmatic. And that shouldn't be an excuse to overlook anything. Because there is hype doesn't mean you should ignore everything that the media is saying, but try to be careful and a bit pragmatic. And by the way, something that you read, it's a side note, but something that you read all the time, there is a new technology, it's like, this is going to replace everything. But if you look back again, photo did not kill painting, DVD did not kill cinema, cars did not kill bike, internet did not kill media, Skype did not kill phones. I've read most of these statements in the media, but it just does not happen. If you look at the story of music and TV, for example, if you look at since the arrival of the internet, the overall media consumption, so you add a new media to the mix, the internet, the overall media consumption gets bigger, but TV doesn't lose its importance. So a new technology usually reshuffles the players, but very rarely replaces everything. Another thing is that not knowing is fine. We live in a world that is changing so fast, and I try to find a way to illustrate that, and I came up with this quote that I found very funny. It was 8 years ago in a newspaper, and George W. Bush was doing his campaign, and he was going to meet farmers in a US state, and somebody was saying, but does anybody realize that there are more players of World of Warcraft than farmers in this country? And yet you don't see a president going to the media saying, today I'm meeting the World of Warcraft players, you know? And it just shows you how sometimes we have things embedded in our brain, like as a politician, I need to go and see the farmers. But actually the reality is that you could also conceive people in a completely different way. This is another thing that is true today, but was not true 15 years ago. It's the example of the Monty Pythons. They put their content free on the internet, and that generated more sales of their DVD. Give something to make more money. That's completely new. So just to show you that these ideas now, we take them a bit for granted, but they were not true 5 years ago. And so it's changing so fast. And the point here is that it's fine to do things without really understanding where it's going. And this is an example from a couple of weeks ago. Harvard and MIT put 60 million into edX. edX is free online courses. Same content you get at Harvard and MIT, but free, online. They have no idea where it's going, but they know it's going to work because you have like 100,000 people signing up for every class. They're going to make money. By the way, a very famous company called Google had absolutely no business model when they launched, and they found it as accidentally. They actually stole it from another company. So not knowing is fine because the world is changing so fast. It's not because you don't know that you don't do your projects. You still have to move forward. And I put my favorite business quote down there. Good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from bad decisions. You're gonna make mistakes, but it's fine. This is how you learn in that world. And one final point I wanted to make, and I'm running out of time, is that innovation, technology is not always the solution. I read this news that I found fascinating last week. UBS fired the head of trading, and they actually replaced him with a computer. UBS fired head of credit default swap index trading David Gellers last week with no plan to fill the position. Instead, the bank replaced Gellers with computer algorithms that trade using mathematical models. You're going to see more and more of that. And computers are starting to take over knowledge workers' jobs. Imagine that the Google car can drive itself. Maybe Google car could be a taxi, for example. Imagine that there are now technologies that are able to translate in real time to a very good level what people say in another language. So computers are starting to really invade our lives in so many ways. And I'm not sure it's the right solution always. And this is a company you don't know, but that gives me a point to say that technology is not always the answer. It's actually a logistics company based in Geneva. And I talked to the founder, and he was telling me the story that actually 10 years ago, when he had to compete with DHL and Deutsche Post and all these big companies, he, of course, bought a computer, and he did like some computer optimization of his fleet, and so the computers would fill the trucks. And then he realized that he just was doing the same thing that these other companies, and he kind of lost his edge. So he also noticed that some drivers were not doing what the computer was telling them and were getting better results, like delivering in less time and for less money. So he basically scrapped the computer system, and they started again to work as they would work 15, 20 years ago, with one driver who knows his very specific area of town, like his pocket, and will himself load his truck and put the stuff into his truck in the order he thinks is good. And that basically gave them an edge over all the companies that are using algorithms, but they don't have the local knowledge. And I think that it's a very interesting message that surviving in this time of change is not always a story of buying more computers and putting more technology, but it can also be that you go back to using people's knowledge and use technology when they bring value, but don't go too far. So these are the points I wanted to share with you today. I'm sorry I ran a bit late. Usually it doesn't happen, but that's, when you're French, you have to do something wrong. I wanted to leave you with a quote that I find very interesting, and that kind of is what I think about all the time when I have to question what I know and reinvent myself, which I have to do constantly. And this is a quote from Alvin Toffler, who said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." Think about that. It's a very, very powerful quote. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention. I wish you a great night. Thank you.